911 operator. What is a call that got you the chills? Little after 2:00 m. I got a call of a car gone off a 100-foot embankment into the river. As officers arrive on scene and begin rescue/body search, I get relayed name of the deceased who had been friends of mine. I knew 5 out of 6 in the car. And as the search was wrapping up, I begin to get calls from parents of the victims who knew me. Rough night in a rural area. Not really the chills, but this stuck with me because it just be such a weird story this guy has for life. Guy called in the morning after going onto his balcony with his morning coffee and he's greeted by a severed arm. Just the arm. Nothing else. Turns out someone had jumped from a much higher floor than his. Smacked his arm on the railing on the way down and the impact took it clean off. The remains of the body had already been cleaned up on the ground by the time this guy called and he had just slept through it all. I find it hard to believe they didn't make a bigger effort to find the arm. It was a year ago. A father called 911 stating his 2-year-old daughter wasn't breathing. I had tried to instruct him on how to do CPR while I got the ambulance out there. He kept refusing and telling me he didn't know how besides me insisting I would help him do it. He told me that his daughter had fallen down the stairs 2 days before the call and that he didn't know what was happening. The mother was screaming in the background. I started to get nervous due to the fact that it was 2 minutes into the call begging this man to do CPR on his baby. He gave the phone to what I'm assuming is the sister of the mother and I gave her instructions on how to attempt to revive this little baby girl. I told the officers something was going on with this and I didn't feel right about it and they get there and I never knew anything until the news a few weeks later. The father and grandmother were arrested for murder on this little baby. She passed away due to consistent abuse by the father when the mom was gone or at work. I never forgot that call. 8-year-old hanged himself. Wife just shot herself in the head. Husband wasn't sure if she was beyond help. So I have him start CPR. At this point, I'm assuming she's gone, but I want to give him something to do and be able to look back and feel like he did everything he could have. While pumping on her chest, their kid who was about 10 walks in. He starts trying to have the kid help. So I tell the kid to grab a towel and apply pressure to the wound. I'm telling a child to hold pressure on his mom's self-inflicted gunshot to her head while coaching the father through CPR. The kid was super focused. Dad was about to lose it multiple times. When medics arrived, she was viable. They transported her. I just assume she didn't make it, but there's always a chance. We rarely get closure. Dad accidentally ran his kid over with the car. My friend who has 6 siblings was getting ready for a family trip. Their mom thought all the kids were in the vehicle and ready to go. She ran over one of the youngest daughters who was still in the driveway and killed her. The mom left the rest of the children with family and moved out of state. My friend said he hadn't spoken to or seen her in years and that was the mother's doing. Guilt. Man. It will eat you alive. My aunt was a 911 dispatcher for a couple months and she told me about these 2 calls she had. This little boy around 6 or 7 was bawling on the phone because his big brother had shot himself in the head and his face and brains were everywhere. The other one is that this little girl, I think was 3, had called because her stepdad was beating the speep out of the mom and my aunt said that you could hear the mom screaming in the background and so after a while the dad came in and beat the speep out of the girl for calling the police and so my aunt had to hear this 3-year-old little girl getting the speep beat out of her while her mom was trying to stop the stepdad. When I was about 7 years old my stepdad was beating the speep out of my mother. He had already broken my sister's arm 2 years older than me while she was trying to defend her. She was crying on the ground and my stepdad was trying to cut off my mother's head with machete. I remember calling the police hidden in the bathroom when he found me. He beat the speep out of me, and one of the biggest guilts I have of that night was talking to the girl on the end of my 911 call and how traumatic it must have been for them to hear. I vividly remember how I never wanted anyone else to experience what we were going through. We get a call at like 7 a.m. from a male who sounded very out of it. He kept saying that his wife was hurt, but we couldn't get much else out of him at first. After some back and forth, we found out that he had got in a fight with her the previous day, like 8 to 10 hours earlier, and hit her repeatedly with one of those meat tenderizer mallets. Then he decided that he couldn't live with it and attempted to cut his own throat. He couldn't follow through with that, so he slit his wrists. He had lost enough blood to go into shock, but not die, and called us when he came to. When responders got on scene, the wife was still alive, though obviously in some seriously rough shape. She was transported, though I'm not sure if she made it or not. Occurred about 2 weeks ago. Get a pretty standard non-urgent difficulty breathing call for meds. Get units started, no problems. Last thing I tell her is to unlock her front door and come back to the phone she had called landline. She gets up and just never comes back. I just get an open line. Can hear some shuffling in the background. Nothing distressing. Honestly, just thought she put the phone down and forgot about it. But we are supposed to stay on the line until confirmation of everything, so I didn't hang up. When the fire department gets there, they inform she had died home alone while on the phone with me. She basically dropped dead immediately after unlocking the front door. I was shocked, and had to go back and re-listen to the call, knowing that woman was dying for a good 2 to 3 minutes and no one could save her. When I worked for the ambulance service 999, but still essentially the same, just UK, my mentor told me there's a suicidal man who wouldn't tell him where he was, just that he wanted to die. He only wanted to talk, and after about 20 minutes said, "I'm ready now. I'm on a bridge over the M25 between junction 1 and 2. And then the phone went dead. The next call they had was from highways saying someone had just jumped from a bridge into the motorway. I've changed the locations for privacy reasons. Not me, and not a call technically. My uncle was a cop for a small town. He worked the overnight and got a call out to a car in the ditch. Body ejected. He showed up and in work mode bypassed everything except the person, who was unrecognizable, and began CPR. Other officers began to show up. They ran the plates on the car and found out the victim was my other uncle, the cop's brother. My cop uncle had no idea he was giving CPR to his brother, as he was so unrecognizable from the crash. My uncle did not survive. It is known that he was drinking, though I don't think he was trashed. He was also texting. The thought is that he began to veer off-road, hit a mailbox and overcorrected and hit the ditch on the other side. He was not wearing his seat belt. The only reason he was found quickly was because he crashed near a farmhouse, and it was heard by the people living there, who called 911. This was in the boonies. Last night I had a call where some lady was calling to complain that these kids were parkouring on a building. While on the phone, one of the kids slipped and fell. Hearing the thud of his body through the phone and her inconsolable scream after wasn't fun. Worked on 999 as an ECT ambulance service UK. The call that stuck with me was a mother of an 8-week-old baby. The baby wasn't breathing properly, and once the mother got close enough to the baby for me to hear agonal breathing, my stick dropped. She was apocalyptically upset but didn't realize just how severe the situation was. I never heard from the crew if the baby survived, but I don't expect it to have. Oh boy, I have several. Mom found 15-year-old hanging in closet deceased. 14-year group of friends accidentally shot their friend in the head, critical condition. Performed CPR on girl's BF who was in denial about him shooting himself, center mass deceased. Female screaming and screaming as she actively got raped on the line with me, unknown outcome. And probably the worst of the worst was listening to an old family friend wail in my ear after finding their son friend of mine who suffered from schizophrenia had committed suicide. Still have nightmares from a few of them, but I'm pretty jaded and don't really get chills anymore. But all of these for sure made my blood stop for a moment.